I was vaguely aware that, people could play video games on YouTube and make a lot of money, but I was like, yeah, but I sew things by hand. I will get, one day, I will achieve 10,000 subscribers, and that will be I will have made it. It didn't exactly work out like that.
I think it worked out better in your favor. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Video Craft Show presented by Video Husky. As always, I am your host, John Santiago, and if you are new around here, it is my job every Tuesday morning, to be exact, that's when we release our episodes, for me to dissect and discuss the stories, strategies, and experiences of building online audiences through video with creators who are doing so. And this week's guest transformed her passion for a history of fashion into a platform of more than 1 million YouTube subscribers and counting. Bernadette Banner is a historian, filmmaker, and creator. She's most known for her YouTube videos documenting her insights on historic English and American fashion, mostly from the Victorian era. Bernadette is an alum of NYU's Tisch Drama School of Arts, where she finished her work in 2017. She also studied at the School of Historical Dress in London, working on reconstruction and publication projects. And Bernadette also spent time working in costume design on Broadway for well-renowned shows such as Aladdin and Annie. In this conversation, Bernadette and I discuss how she conducts research for her videos and why the research process never actually ends, how she thinks about allocating and dedicating her time to the variety of different platforms that she's active on. And also we actually go deep on a very heart-to-heart matter of the costs that creators like her have to pay when they become public figures with massive and growing audiences. That and so much more on this episode of the Video Craft Show presented by Video Husky. But before we toss to the conversation, I want to remind everybody to hit the like button if you are watching us on YouTube, or leave a comment if you are enjoying the show. We read all of them. And also, if you aren't subscribed to the podcast, you can do so anywhere that you get your podcasts. We are available at Apple, Spotify, Pocket Casts, Castbox, anywhere, you name it, Stitcher. You can subscribe to the Video Craft Show wherever it is that you get your podcasts. So let's go ahead without further ado and toss it to my conversation with Bernadette Banner. Bernadette Banner, thank you for joining me on this episode of the Video Craft Show presented by Video Husky. It is a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm quite nervous to to speak with you because you are so articulate, you are so well-spoken, and you clearly know so much about fashion history, dress history, and this is the second time that I've actually admitted to it. How nervous I can be going into a conversation. I had an astrophysicist on, also from the UK, who is a
Wait, YouTuber, is it Dr. Becky?
Yes.
I love her.
Yes. I had Dr. Becky on as well. You guys, maybe I should connect you two if you guys.
I'm in such good company.
Yeah, if there's an opportunity for you two to do a collaboration, that would be awesome, because I know she's a researcher there at Oxford. But yes, a little bit nervous, but I think I've prepared as best I can for this conversation. And like I said, I'm just excited to have you here.
Yeah, well, if it helps, it's all lies. The magic of editing makes everyone sound more articulate and witty than they actually are in real life.
Yes, exactly. We're going to get into that in terms of just your content creation process, editing process, all of that. But I do, when these conversations, I really like to dive into the beginnings. Like even things unrelated, it might seem, to the content creation journey. I'm really fascinated by what initially drew you to be interested in the history of fashion in the first place? Like, when did this begin for you?
Good question. I was interested in costume for a while. I actually started in film. Started doing film and studying film, and my sibling and I would make dumb little videos, and then I went on to study film, and I realized that my favorite part of the process was the costumes and designing and making the costumes. And so I went to go work in theatrical costume on Broadway for a while. And then I went to university afterwards. And then I discovered the history of dress as a field of study in and of itself, rather than, costume design for film or for stage. But there was so much intricacy and so much story to be told and to learn from in the actual garments themselves and how the real clothes were constructed. There's so much mystery to discover in there. So I went on to work a bit in historical dress and study a bit more in that field. And I fell so in love with it and felt so passionately about it that I wanted to share it with people online. And most of the historical costuming community, people who make historical clothes to wear and have fun in, are on Instagram. So I was on Instagram a bit, posting pictures of my hand stitching, but the way that I naturally feel compelled to tell a story is through video. So I started filming the process and putting it on YouTube. And there were a couple of people doing that too already. None of us really knew each other, but turns out that a lot of people were interested in that.
Yeah, quite a lot. I mean, at this point, you have over 1 million subscribers on your YouTube channel, which I'm assuming like a couple years ago when you were starting this project, you weren't even dreaming that this would reach that many people.
No, I was vaguely aware that, people could play video games on YouTube and make a lot of money, but I was like, yeah, but I sew things by hand. I will get one day I will achieve 10,000 subscribers, and that will be I will have made it. It didn't exactly work out like that.
I think it worked out better in your favor. So yes. There's something I want to dial back into something that you had mentioned. So in doing research for this conversation, I know that you studied at NYU's Tisch Drama School of the Arts, and that you, as you mentioned, you worked on Broadway. So you worked on Broadway as a design assistant before you attended college. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So how did you land? So were you just fresh out of high school, or were you still working in high school during that time, or still going to high school at that time?
I was backstage at my final show that I was working on in high school when I got the email saying from the Broadway costume designer saying, "We would like to meet you. Please, can you come to New York?" Wow. It's nothing. I mean, I don't know how things work now. Things are a bit different, but it was really just a matter of me 17-year-old me saying, if I could do anything in the world this summer, what would I want to do? Well, work on Broadway for this costume designer who I really admire. So I found her email address and I sent her an email saying, "Do you need an assistant? I need a job." And she said yes. And then one thing led to another thing led to another thing. I ended up working for a couple of different designers. And so the thing about most, I won't say every job, but most jobs, is that it's less about what you know and more about who you know. Because skills can be taught, for the most part, unless you're doing brain surgery or rocket science, skills can be taught, but you cannot teach working well with a person. So, if you're a hard worker, if you work well with the team, I got on very well with everyone there. And then, those people were able to recommend me to other people. I would just keep working for the same designer who said, "I have another show going on, come do this with me." And it was sort of a whirlwind roller coaster. I had no idea what I was getting into. It was thrilling, it was exciting, but it was all of a sudden 4 years had gone by and I'm like, I need to go to school.
So what was the timeline there for that? Because I know that you graduated in 2017. So right out of high school, essentially, you reached out. What was the timeline there on that in terms of the time you were working there in Broadway?
I moved to New York in 2012 to start working. And then I did that for I did a little bit of community college, just taking courses because I'm like, I should probably do this university thing. I hated it. It was not my jam. I was like, maybe I'll just drop out. But while I was working, this was in 2014. So only 2 years later, I met the designer I was working for had a good friend who happened to be the costume design head of department at NYU. And I met her and I got on really well with her. So I ended up going to NYU in 2014 and then leaving after one term
Okay.
because the designer I was working for had another big show come up and it was last minute and he couldn't find anyone else to join the team. So I was like, okay, I'll come do this. It ended up being three. Well, it was 2 shows, and then I went on to do another 3 productions of a show that I'd worked on a couple of years ago that was going international. So they were all sort of back to back to back. Anyway, I ended up, basically leaving. And then this is where it gets complex. But so the professor who I went to NYU for ended up passing away very tragically. And she was the one who kept telling me, you need to go to school, you need to get your degree if it's the last thing you do. And so when that happened, it was sort of like between my boss and I, it was sort of just unspoken. I need to step back and I need to go to school just do that now. And that's when I discovered dress history and ended up never going back to the theater.
Wow. I'm curious, when you made that cold outreach to the person you ended up working with on Broadway initially, was there any hesitancy before you pressed send? I mean, because sometimes people, they're afraid to like make that cold outreach because they're like, I don't think they're actually, like, even when I reached out to you, I kind of was like, I don't know if she's going to say yes. But, I personally just felt like, well, there's nothing to lose. I'm wondering if you just kind of had that same kind of mentality.
Well, I was a bit more fearless when I was young. Now I'm like, wow, maybe I should think this through a little bit more. But in a weird way, that's actually not as helpful. Mm-hmm. I don't recall having any reservations. I want to do this. I'm very excited. Send. Mm. And I think that's a very good attitude to have. I mean, it proved well enough for me. But you never know unless you ask.
Yeah. Do you think that fearlessness kind of also helped propel you into YouTube and content creation as well? Like just not having that, fear of like, oh, people are going to judge me or think of, have their things to say about what I'm making or publishing here on this platform.
It helps to not, I'm not sure if I can swear.
No, you can.
Okay. It helps to not give a shit what people think. That will get you very far in life. But the other thing that helps is not knowing what you're getting yourself into. I had no idea what I was getting myself into working on Broadway. I had no idea what I was getting myself into on YouTube. I had no idea it would turn into this. So you never know what's going to happen, but also I think it helps not to get caught up in the what if, but just to do it for intrinsic reasons, because you feel a passion, because you feel like something in this idea is so potent that I can't not do it, Yeah,
I can totally relate to that, where you just kind of like accept the mystery that is life for the most part, right? Like you just kind of have to, I mean, we all have plans, but like what is the saying? Like man has plans and God laughs, right? Like
something like that.
Something like that. So we can try to like micromanage and plan things out as much as possible, but life happens and it can take you in different directions that you don't really anticipate. Everything
happens for a reason. That's what I like to just keep in mind, because I do a lot of reckless stuff like this. And I just, I keep in mind everything happens for a reason. If I send the email and the person doesn't respond, it's not meant to be. If I do this thing and it turns out badly, it happened that way because that had to happen to prevent something even worse from happening. There's no scientific data or proof in any of that, but it just, it helps to keep your head on.
Yes. So when you went to school at NYU and then also while you were, working on Broadway, what were some of the big lessons that you learned from those particular experiences?
The importance of being a professional, the importance of conducting yourself professionally, I think is probably the most important thing. Mm-hmm. Being nice to people, being respectful to people, because you never know who you're going to need help from, who you're going to need a favor from, or who's going to need you in the future. And you don't want to make that situation awkward for them to have to approach you if there was some weird unprofessionality that happened between you. I'm not speaking towards any specific incidents or anything, but it's just something that having, looked back on my journey, and none of this was really done intentionally, but looking back, I realize a lot of that training early on, because I was young, a lot of college students make many foolish errors. Not to say that I didn't make foolish errors, but, there's not a whole lot about my pre-professional life on the internet because I was working in a professional situation right out of school, and that was sort of a necessity. But I'm very, very grateful for that. I'm not sure if that's like useful or applicable to...
No, I think it is. I mean, it is very fascinating though. In terms of doing research, I did find that very interesting that you don't do many interviews. I read an interview that you did with, I forget the publication. I have it here. It was an article titled "Learning Mindfulness from the Art of Victorian Dressmaking" with hyperallergic. But there isn't that much information actually about you pre your YouTube channel, and obviously like what you've created on Instagram and other platforms as well. I mean, and that's so rare these days, because it seems like, and you're still relatively young, you're still in your 20s, and most people's lives are like broadcasts and their entire histories all the way up from like their teenage years all the way up until, you know, adulthood now. And like, I just found that very fascinating that you have the awareness and presence of mind to
it was, I won't go so far as to say it was awareness, but I'm very, very grateful for that to be my situation, because I do recall as young as 18, 19, 20, I was part of a team. I was, as myself, my name represented not only the designer, who in some cases had Tony Awards, but also a commercial production. You know, Broadway is commercial entertainment. It's, if I do something, if I'm, you know, messing around on the internet, that can potentially reflect on these other institutions and these other people that I respect, who had the extreme courtesy, decency to give a job to a teenager with no experience. So I kept all my social media very private. Everything was locked down. Everything was heavily regulated. You know, I only friend the people that I know on Facebook and all that sort of thing. But I also didn't for a while, and there is a downside to that, because for a while it took me a long time to realize that I have a voice. I am a person. I have skills and talents, because for so long I was working under extremely talented people, like top of the line industry, Tony Award winning. And when you're starting as a teenager with no college training, like not even that, it's like, I will never be that. I will forever be the downstairs girl. I will never be Lady Mary or the Dowager or Downton Abbey references.
Okay.
But it took me a while to reach that point. I guess objectively not that long, because I'm still young, but it was definitely a big mindset shift, and one that happened. A lot of people perceived my worth before I perceived my worth, which can put you in a dangerous situation.
When you say that, are you talking about in terms of people like believing in you and seeing like your potential and really encouraging you to become the person that you are still becoming today, but it was something where you didn't necessarily see that yet in yourself?
Yes, there were good sides to that. I had many professors at university who saw things in me that I didn't see in myself and said, I have this opportunity for you to go study in London with these dress historians. Why don't you go do this? And inside I was like, I cannot do that. I am not qualified to do that. I will. And it's those people who pushed me to do that to get me to where I am. So I'm grateful to that. But I've also, you know, when you reach the realm of status that the masses find desirable, and I'm talking about followers mainly, you know, social status, then you start to get people who want to take advantage of that. So I've had a couple of instances of people trying to use my influence before I even realized I had influence. So that was a weird period of time. And I mean, now I'm quiet on the internet for different reasons, and that I'm very reserved and very mistrustful.
Yeah, how do you decipher that these days, especially with like the platform that you've grown, right? Like you just got to 1 million subscribers a couple months ago, right? Like in the springtime. I know from talking to other YouTubers who've platforms grown, there's kind of like this feeling of like, yeah, it matters, but it doesn't matter. But like you said, you've had experiences where people might present themselves as trustworthy to you, but they don't necessarily have your best interests in mind. Have you hone like a radar for detecting this, or do you still feel like you're learning how to like navigate like who is trustworthy and who is, you know, trying to work with you just for like their own personal gain or financial gain?
I'm still learning, and to prove that point, my method of, because I have not developed that instinct and I'm aware of that, I have swung the opposite direction of not trusting anyone that I have not, you know, known since the before times, which is also an issue because you can't just go through the rest of your life not meeting new people.
Yes.
But it is continuing to be a learning process, and we'll see. We will see. I do still work with people, obviously. I work, well, through the business of YouTube. There are people who pay me my going rates to say, you know, can you give me a 60-second integration in your YouTube videos? Yeah, great, cool, done. There is the vetting process of, does this brand align with my beliefs, and are they relevant to my audience and all that? But if I see a brand or a person or a cause that speaks to me, I'm usually the one to approach them and say, I believe in this. I want to make content around this. I want to promote this. I want to promote you because I believe that this deserves a platform. There's no point in having a platform if you can't use it to elevate other important things. So usually those are the people who will come back and say, but can I offer you free stuff? Free, you know, can I pay? And I don't like to take payment because, you know, then it becomes transactional. This is complex and muddled, and again, something I'm also trying to figure out. But a lot of the institutions that I work with within dress history and within the costuming niche, I don't take payment from because they're small businesses, they're independent, you know, craftspeople, and I just want to give them the platform. That wandered in a direction that was irrelevant from the original question.
No, it's okay though. Like honestly, every time things wander in different directions, I encourage it. I encourage guests to go on different paths because then it allows me to. I always prepare like a large list of questions, but like they always, like 60% of them get thrown out because there's always something that gets brought up by the guest that I didn't anticipate. So I always encourage it, and there are things that I do want to talk to you about regarding some of the things that you just said in terms of like evaluating brands and partners to work with. But before we get there, I do want to talk to you about just the start of your YouTube channel. How long were you thinking about getting started on YouTube before you actually took the plunge and started publishing there?
I had the epiphany on the 31st of December, 2017. No. Yes. No? Yes, it was. It was 2017. I was frantically trying to finish the hem of a gown that I was working on that I'd promised I would get done by the end of the year, and it was New Year's Eve. And I needed to finish the hem. And I was like, oh, I just wish I had like a YouTube channel that I could watch that was focused on historical reconstruction that would calm me down and keep me entertained while I do this. And then I realized I could do that. I love filmmaking. Like I could do this thing. I'm not very good at speaking. I'm not very good at, being my own voice and being my own person outside of a team. So like putting myself out there is a bit weird, but like I don't have to appear on camera. I can just be behind the camera. It's just my hands. And for my first couple of videos, you can see I don't appear on screen. Well, my face doesn't appear. Except like 6 days later, I was scheduled to fly to London for a couple of months for a job.
Wow.
So I realized, well, I have this idea that I feel like I really want to work on, and I can't work on it, which makes you want to do it more. So I spent pretty much the entire 4 months that I was on that other job, on my occasional day off. I had like one day off occasionally where I would just sit in my room, like planning out, like, what does my channel art look like? What does my branding look like? What is my mission statement? What am I trying to do with these videos? I did all this planning. And then as soon as I got back to New York, I started filming. So I did have forced time to plan, which I think ended up working out quite well.
Yeah, so it sounds like you had the idea, but you were able to kind of prepare essentially for like a formal launch, so to speak, rather than just like, I'm just gonna start posting now. There was It was kind of like that, because I wasn't planning like, this is going to be my upload schedule. I wasn't planning to run it like a YouTube channel. But I just had this idea that I was excited about, and any planning that I could do just was fun. But I uploaded like one video in April, and then like one in May, and then like it was very sporadic until it became a job, and I realized I should probably upload more frequently. When you decided to start uploading more frequently, was that just because you started to get traction from some of those early videos, or were you just feeling like, okay, if I really want to get good at this, I do just have to have like a consistent publication and production schedule here for potential viewers? I
didn't pursue YouTube as a business. I wasn't trying to become a YouTuber until I realized that that was an option. You know, I was still in the headspace for the majority of those first couple of months that no one cares. Like, the wider world does not care about historical sewing. I'm just here doing my thing, having a good time, and then like one video got 400 views rather than 50. And I was like, what do I do with all of this attention? So I put up more videos, and then more people started to view those, and it just sort of snowballed until one day one video just completely took off, and I went up like 50,000 subscribers in the course of 2 weeks. And I realized, so this thing that I'm aware of, this employment possibility on YouTube, is possible. And I just buckled down and did so much research on the monetization strategies and how all of that works, how to optimize it, so that, because I was kind of on a cusp. As a freelancer, I knew my month-to-month expense requirements. So how can I configure YouTube to meet those expenses so that I can do this full-time?
What were you using equipment-wise initially to get started? Were you just using your phone, or did you have a camera that you invested in perhaps to kind of get the ball rolling?
I did buy a camera for this purpose. My phone, I had the iPhone 5 or something. I hate upgrading my phones. I'm so reluctant to upgrading my technology because it works. It's fine. Yes. I can still call people. I don't want to be like wasteful about it. It was just the same amount of money to buy a used camera on Amazon, refurbished, than to buy a new iPhone. So I thought, I'll keep my old phone. It still works. And I'll buy a specific camera just for the YouTube videos. And yeah, I had to buy it on credit, and it was a bit of paying it off, but it was a worthy investment.
Now, as far as like the creation process of your content, what's really fascinating to me, having deep dive into your videos, a handful of your videos, is just the amount of research that you do. And obviously, as a historian, that's a large part of your job in your role. That's what you do. So I'm really curious about that process. Like, what does that look like? Where does the research process begin, and how long does that ensue in terms of like the creation of your videos?
The research never ends. My sponsorship deadlines dictate when I stop researching. So I've got to get a video out by this day, and I need this many days to edit, and this many days to shoot, and this many days to write, so I need to stop researching on this day. In a way, all of my videos are incomplete, but then again, all of history is incomplete. Like, you will never make the one pinnacle video of perfection, which is why I feel so strongly about including citations and sources in my videos. Like, here is where I got every bit of information. That way, if it's wrong, if it's disproven, if it needs elaborating on, if someone needs to verify or read up on this or confirm, the information is there. I'm not hopefully spreading too much misinformation. What we do for YouTube is effectively like writing a lot of small research papers.
Yes.
The research videos, usually the research takes me about a week. writing the video can take me 3 days because all of my scripts are basically written like academic papers with footnotes, citations, bibliographies, because that all needs to go into the editing. I put footnotes in my editing. So it's funny, I was speaking with a professor who teaches a PhD program in dress history, and I was talking about, I would love to get my PhD or get a master's degree, and she was like, why? You've already done the work. Just go get the PhD.
Because is she suggesting that you could just basically like present your YouTube videos as like your master's thesis, essentially?
Well, it would have to be a different, it would have to be a purpose project. But, I was saying like, I would love to enroll in a master's program and, study dress history like officially. And she was like, the head of the program was like, why? You're not going to learn anything here. They teach you to research the way that I'm not the only person who does YouTube research videos as well, but the people who do this sort of work on YouTube are already doing it. Just, in a different way, different presentation. It's all, YouTube presentation is so new. It's all unregulated and unformatted. No, we're all making it up, but,
So does this start in a library rather than like, I think a lot of people, like the average human being, their research for anything now starts with like a Google search. But for you, in terms of like the intricacy of your videos and the knowledge and insights that you are presenting in them, I'm curious if you're going to libraries and looking up books and whatnot that would have that are published and have credible information, as opposed to whatever the Google algorithm feeds at the top of its search results for a keyword.
Yes. In pre-pandemic times, yes, the library is my best friend, but libraries were shut down for a little while. I try to be within walking distance of a library wherever, whenever I have to hunt for a flat, find living situation, where is the nearest library is always criteria. Yeah, I will say there is a lot of really great information on the internet now. Books are rapidly being digitized. Lots of things are available for free. The main criteria is primary sources, the sources that I reference. I can't reference a BuzzFeed article. I can't reference something written by someone in the 21st century without looking at their qualifications and their sources. Where did they get that information? And ultimately trace it back to a primary source. Because if someone in the period I'm studying did not originally say the thing, and it's plausible, which is a whole different can of worms, but then it's not really a credible source. So you can find really great primary sources on the internet. It's not like the library is just hands down better, because you do find a lot of really questionable secondary sources in libraries that don't have the best information or have outdated information by people who didn't, written by people who didn't live in the original time period. So it's just being discerning about your research.
Tell me if this is like a fair assumption to make, but it really feels like this kind of work that you do, like for most people, right, if they're going to school and they're trying to get a degree in something, research is kind of like tedious, right? It's part of what I have to do to get here or get to some destination, whether it's a degree or something else. But for you, it really does sound like it's like play for you, right? Like you just geek out over this stuff. I can see it in your face right now.
I'm in group chats with other dress historians, and some of us will be researching, some of us on YouTube, researching for a video, like, oh my god, guys, I just found, look at this source, just getting so excited about, because it is like, there's a difference between researching something for a paper that you have to write for a class that you don't really want to take, but that's a requirement you just need a grade for, versus researching something that you're genuinely curious about. How did people pee in those dresses? I have a question, I have a curiosity, and I want an answer. And then you start reading about, the original sources written from the people in the period, and you realize there's so much more nuance to, you not only learn about how people peed in those dresses, but you get to read their language, how they spoke, their opinions. Oh my god, the 19th century is so opinionated. When they write their instruction manuals, they're never objective. This is the correct way to do it, because if you do it this way, it is ugly, it is bad, it is hideous, it is unsightly. Never be caught dead in a gown like this. It's hilarious how almost relatable some of it is. You get lost in it. It's fascinating.
It's very cool. Yeah, I remember it was one of my favorite books that I had read. It was actually for school. I'd read the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. And I remember, and it's him writing it himself, and just kind of interesting to learn about his whole experiences. And he was like a modern. He was actually one of like the fathers of journalism, but like his journalism was very like opinionated.
Yeah,
like it was very much like, I'm dropping in what I think about things, and like this idea of objectivity is like we chase it and we aspire to it, but it's something that that's really like as close as we get, is like just to aspire to it rather than like sometimes achieve it. I don't know if that's something that I think about sometimes, especially when it comes to processing information, and especially all the information that we have these days.
That's definitely an important skill if you want to be a researcher. Question everything that you ever read, even the historical stuff, even the modern stuff, everything.
So where did this curiosity for you come from? Like, did you grow up with a family that like asked a lot of questions, or did you have friends who maybe like influenced you to be curious, or were you just always somebody who was just asking why a lot?
I don't recall a lot. I don't have the greatest memory. So I can't say for sure like where the origins of deep childhood come from. But we were very independent. We were a very independent household. Very much, everyone has their jobs, everyone works hard, and you take care of yourself. And so I was very, doing things. What do I want to do, and how do I make it happen? I mean, this goes back to getting the job. But if I want to learn something, how do I make it happen? Where do I go? Where do I look?
Gotcha.
Is that a sufficient answer?
No, I think it's great. Yeah, no, I mean, it's, everyone's curiosity originates from different places. So it's always fascinating to hear how people answer that question when I ask them. Sometimes people are able to like source it to an exact moment or a person or something in their life. And others are a bit more, a bit more nebulous at times, which is, that's kind of just what life is like. It's just this whole nebulous experience. Yeah. As far as production of videos, we've touched on how much you go into researching them, writing them. In terms of editing, how long does that normally take you to edit a video?
So long. It depends on the video, because I do different types of videos. The sewing videos that I do take ages, because I've got often 4 hours of footage, 3 minutes straight of like felling a seam, and it's those, maybe they just feel longer because they're so boring to edit, honestly. Because I'm the one who has to go through the 4 hours of stitching in order to chop it up into little 2, 3, 4 second chunks and make it a really fast paced, look at this beautiful thing I just magically whipped together. Even though, the research videos, maybe those are a bit worse. They don't take as long, but they feel like they take a long time. I'm sensing a pattern here. The slotting in of the images, sourcing all the images. Oh my God, image permissions are a nightmare. No one's made any rules about whether or not YouTube content is commercial and whether we should be paying 400 euros to use an image in a YouTube video or not. I used to adhere a bit more to the academic, source all your images, either public domain or pay for them. And I've been a bit more lax recently, because how can you put out content at all if you can't use any images? But anyway, it depends on the video. The more cinematic, artistic ones I enjoy a bit more. So the sewing videos, I do enjoy bits of those a bit more. I'm making it sound like I hate it. I don't hate it. I actually really,
No.
I really love editing. It takes so long. So by the end of it, I'm like, stick a fork in me. I'm done.
Yeah. It's a very tedious,
difficult.
It's very tedious, right? Like it's so there's so much work that goes into it, because that is ultimately like that plays like the biggest role in like presenting the final product. Like,
well,
even
it almost
you could
takes on a character of itself. The editing becomes part of the character of the video, and that's why I find it so difficult to pass the editing off to someone else. Firstly, because you develop a style that your viewers get used to, but also, you know, how do I then explain, you know, it would have to be someone who knows how to sew, because they have to understand the order in which things have to be done. So there are some videos that are, you know, the costume review videos. I pass those off to other people because you don't need image permissions, you don't need footnotes, you don't need sewing processes. Take it. But that's one of the difficulties of our niche in specific, in particular,
it's
is
very
that
narrow.
yeah, when you get into a niche that is very a specific field or a trade or a skill or a craft, the editor, you know, the team, the people working behind the scenes have to understand that to an extent as well. I wandered off. How
much time do you spend on coming up with your thumbnails and even titling your videos? I know that many YouTubers, they will spend an inordinate amount of time on
it's so
on
important.
those. Yeah, because if they're not appealing enough, like nobody will click, right? So, but at the same time, I imagine there's a feeling of like, well, I don't also want to, you know, spend way too much time on this too. So I'm just kind of curious about that as well.
I admittedly spend less time than most creators. I feel like I'm not the type of person who goes photoshopping my thumbnail on the YouTube homepage to make sure it stands out. You know, I make a thumbnail. I'll spend about 15, 20 minutes, half an hour making a nice thumbnail. I generally make the thumbnail and title the video before I start shooting. That way I can clickbait. I can make the video title catchy, but actually follow through and answer the question that I'm promising. You know, as I'm shooting, make sure I answer that question. So I'm not leaving people feeling unfulfilled having clicks on my video. So less time than some, but you know, I'm not one of those creators who will change out a thumbnail. I'm like, well, that video flopped. On to the next one. So it depends on your mindset, I guess. I can't be bothered. The marketing, I will say, is an important aspect of running a successful channel. I like to say you have to play 3 roles. You have to be the talent, which, you know, depending on what your content is, depends. So like, I'm a seamstress dress historian. You have to be a filmmaker, because if you hate the production, you're going to hate like a third of your job. And then you have to be a marketer. You have to know how to sell your content. So it is part of the job, but it's one of the less demanding parts.
Yeah. Are there any other things that you do in terms of like marketing beyond just thinking about the title and thumbnails of your video? It seems like I'm guessing that you didn't do much or invest much time into like trying to post to different places or communities or anything like that to promote your content.
No, but I am strategic about the other platforms that I run. So I am on Instagram, a little bit on TikTok, but like mostly just to recut videos and, you know, let those hit the TikTok algorithm and direct them to YouTube. But I am strategic about my Instagram content. I'm, you know, within the days leading up to a video, I'm posting stories about the production. I'm posting, you know, I make sure to post my most aesthetically appealing images in the run up to a video. That way, you know, you sort of remind people that you exist. I have dropped trailers for bigger videos that I've done, you know, like documentary features on a specific craft that I've done, you know, where like, I really want people to see this and I've, you know, put a lot of effort into this. I don't always, you know, go to all of those extents, but it depends on the project, how much I, you know, go all in with the marketing. But, you know, you don't want to be too markety about it. You know, you don't want to write like sales copy and then it just, people aren't about that life anymore. People want creators. So like there's a way to market, and I use that term, you know, in the philosophical sense of just fundamentally how to remind people that you exist and to get excited about what you're about to put out without making it feel like, you know, you're a used car salesman saying, "Want to watch my video? Come watch my video."
Yeah, you're definitely not trying to. You want to avoid feeling like you're trying to suck value out of the audience. You're like trying to present the value to them of like, hey, look, like I made this, like this is something that I think you will enjoy. It's almost like it's kind of like trying to balance caring and not caring at the same time. Like you want people to watch it, but at the same time, you're not offended if people don't watch.
Right. Well, in fact, it's actually better if people who aren't interested don't watch, because you don't need that negativity in your life. But you also don't want to commodify your audience. You know, they're not walking dollar signs. They're not a walking subscriber number. They're not this mass. They are individual humans who might learn something from your content or might be entertained by your content. So maybe this will benefit us both. Are you interested in this?
I'm curious also too about, you mentioned there like posting, like Instagram seems to be where, aside from YouTube, where you're posting and sharing content the most. You have some good stuff on TikTok. I checked that out as well. Oh. You have 150,000 plus followers already there on TikTok. How do you go about managing all of this content that needs to go out on each platform?
I don't put a whole lot of effort into TikTok and Instagram, I will admit. My revenue comes from YouTube, and therefore YouTube has my loyalty as a platform. Not that you do this all for money, but TikTok and Instagram, it doesn't really make sense to be using the time that you could be spending on YouTube on Instagram. So I will post, you know, if I have a really cool screenshot that I took from a video, you know, I'll put that on Instagram with a fun caption. And then, you know, engage with the comments for a couple of hours. And, you know, I do enjoy Instagram. I do love the artistic aspect of still photography. I'm not making short form video content unless, you know, it can be sucked out of an existing YouTube video. It's about managing your time. I mean, I guess this gets into the business aspect of YouTube, but I am a one-man, mostly, for the most part, a one-man production crew. I need to be putting my time into the activities that will have the most return on investment. Whatever that, like, however you define success, because it's different for everyone. Maybe success for you is subscriber numbers, which is fine. Maybe it's profit. Maybe it's engagement. Maybe it's impact. How do you measure that? You know, just defining like what means the most. What aspects fulfill you? What platforms give you that most fulfillment? And therefore, how do you direct the most of your energy that you possibly can towards that fulfillment? I'm speaking very vaguely, I feel like, but I'm kind of just thinking off the top of my head.
No. I think you make sense there in terms of what you're talking about there in terms of like return on investment. It makes sense because time is like a finite resource. And so if you're allocating time to something that you don't know if it's going to actually yield anything, versus like you dedicating time to something that you do know is like a proven platform for yourself. Why dive into that? Especially as a solo person, you know, that is producing everything pretty much on your own.
Yeah, I won't say like never take a risk. I would say, you know, if the data shows that one thing is better than the other, and there are very definitive negative aspects of putting your time to somewhere, don't do that. That's what I really mean. But, you know, you never know unless you try. And I'm all about giving things a go, giving things a good, genuine, wholehearted go. But the data for me says on Instagram, the way their algorithm works, YouTube is set up that they earn money, the platform earns money through the ads on your videos. They want people to see your videos all the time if people are interested. Instagram gets paid through paid promotion. If you haven't paid to promote your Instagram post, they don't care about you. So they're going to suppress your posts after about 8 hours really. Whereas on YouTube, your content has more potential to reach more people, earn more money, have more engagement, have more impact, you know, whatever your defined goals of success are, there's more potential for me, you know, as I see it. You know, a photographer might see more return on investment from Instagram, but for me, you know, all I see on Instagram is I will post a picture, it will get about 8 hours of engagement, sometimes really nice engagement, sometimes kind of fair engagement, but, you know, people forget about it, people scroll past it, it doesn't earn money. You know, it doesn't really have lasting impact on people. It's hard to teach something on Instagram. It's easier to teach on YouTube. So there's just a bit less draw for my putting out focused content on Instagram. But that's just me. Everyone works differently, has different goals, different skill sets, etc.
Yeah, exactly. So we're diving here a little bit into the business side of things, and I do want to ask you about a little more about that. I know you also have a Patreon account, and you have like over 1,000 patrons who are supporting your channel. Yes. And I'm curious about that. Like, how did you think about what to offer patrons on your Patreon account, and how did you decide on like the tier system that you have? So you have like four tiers of offerings for your fans.
This is the worst, but I kind of have not updated those since I started Patreon, and it's really bad.
Oh, okay.
Everyone on Patreon is absolutely wonderful, and it's something that I did not prepare for going into it. I put a ton of effort into what can I offer people, how can I make this worth people's investment, or worth their money, whatever it is. And then I opened up the Patreon and very quickly realized people are not, I mean, it depends on the content. If you're a business and your relation to your audience is more transactional, then people may expect more rewards. But I tend to see from individual creators, from independent artists, from academics, what have you, people are there to support the work. And as long as you're doing the work.
That's all that matters.
Yeah, as now that I have excess income as a creator, I'm patroning of like 12 different people, and I have all their notifications turned off. Like, I don't want the emails. I don't care about the rewards. I want to support the work that they do, and now I get that now. There are obviously people who are there for the rewards, so I do have tier systems, but I try and, again, like, regulate the time that it takes, because it's so easy to be spending 3 days a week just doing Patreon work. It becomes an issue of then you're doing more Patreon work that takes away from the YouTube work that most of those people are paying you for. I do have a bit of an issue. Like, I haven't fully solved this, but my YouTube content takes so much time. The sewing of garments takes so much time. The editing, the filming, it takes so much time. So my time resources for other platforms is a bit limited. So I try and put out tiers that are meaningful to people, but that I don't have to physically spend a certain amount of time for each individual fulfillment of a thing. That was something I learned very quickly. I used to do mailings, and it used to consume days of my week. And I very quickly realized that I can't do that.
Yeah,
it makes me sad.
You're only one person, but at the same time, like in the beginning, right? Like when you start doing that, and maybe when your audience is a little bit smaller, you can do those kinds of things, right? You can be a little bit more personal.
Well, I didn't expect thousands of people to be, I thought it would be like, 100 people, 200 people if I was lucky. I'm very grateful for it. Like, I would want to send them all cookies every week if I could.
But you're only one person. That's the thing. Like, you're a single human being.
I have polled people before, because for a while it was a guilt that just weighed on me. Am I giving these people their money's worth? Am I worth their time and their hard-earned money? Because for a while, I was a freelancer. $10 was a lot of money for me. People are paying $20 a month to me for my content. Like, why? So I would poll people and say, like, what other rewards do you want? Am I, like, how do you feel about, like, 99% of the responses came back like, I don't even use the rewards that you have. So yeah, I do feel like I do have rewards there, but they're mostly, I think, a decent compromise between things that people enjoy, that, like early access to a video, or for my upper tier patrons, we do a monthly Q&A session / sewing hangout, live chat. So there's a little bit of, if you have sewing questions, come, maybe I can answer them. Other people in the group can answer them, because I'm not an expert on knitting, but someone else is an expert on knitting, and people get help with their projects, and then, we all hang out together. So it's nice like that. It doesn't require like me to take a day out of YouTube work, but it still caters to a group of people all at once. It's just nice.
So basically, it seems like you have Patreon, which is kind of just running essentially like on autopilot for the most part. And then you have AdSense revenue, and then you have brand deals. Is that kind of like an accurate picture of just how you've been able to go full time into being a creator?
Yeah, those are my 3 primary sources of income right now. I have been working on some other projects that will pay money in future. We hope.
Care to tease any of them, or is that still confidential?
No, they're both still confidential.
Okay.
But...
once they're released,
well,
like maybe we can go and give it a shout out to like our email list and whatnot to so feel free to let me know.
No, it doesn't. That. I'm not trying to promote anything, but there are other ways of making money that aren't those 3 things, and it is worth taking some time to put in some effort to build a thing that will end up being a source of passive income in the future. Online courses, books, things that you have to take some time to actually craft a good piece of thing that once it's out in the world, people can enjoy it and benefit from it for the rest of time. And, that's why I say, hopefully it will make money, because right in the beginning stages, it feels like a lot of, I'm sacrificing so much of my time for this thing and I'm not getting paid for it. But then in the future, you're like, oh my God, thank goodness I did that.
Yes. It's like that. It's like going back to what you were talking about, like the return, like you're not quite sure yet if like this is going to return, like some of these things that you're working on, but there's a good likelihood that it will. I mean, it's just, you kind of have to delay the gratification or, into your bank account, so to speak, for, and once it's made, you don't have to work on it again, right? It's just,
yes,
that's part of it, is like being able to lock in that value of the time that you spent into still being able to earn from it in the future, right?
Yes.
So as we kind of wrap up here, Bernadette, once again, thank you so much for your time and chatting with me today. I do want to ask you a couple more things. One of which is in terms of like dealing with feedback from the audience and from the viewers. How do you deal with negative feedback in particular? I mean, especially when you're when you are creating these videos that are very well researched. I'm sure you get like people who say, but that's not right. I read this in this book, or I read this somewhere else, or I watched this somewhere else, and they said this one thing that contradicts what you're saying. And so I'm really curious about how you deal with that, internal. I imagine it's like an internal struggle at times to deal with the feedback of others.
It's not so bad, really. I find that I only read comments on things, on YouTube videos, within the first 24 hours. That is a very hard rule that I have. Sometimes it's less, now that I'm in the UK and I go to sleep when everyone starts commenting at night, in the middle of the night for me. But I find that within the first 24 hours, you have the notification squad, you have people who are really hype about your content, and who give you that nice, like, you did a good job, like, you worked hard, applause for you, and it feels nice. But I don't believe, personally, that it's good. Like, we're not built as humans to process the amount of feedback about ourselves and our work that the internet permits us access to. I don't like to read constant praise because I am not a perfect creator. I'm not a perfect academic. I do make mistakes, and I don't need that in my head. But I also find that the people who comment, who genuinely do have other counterpoints or arguments or important points, tend to, when they're commenting within the first 24 hours, they are excited about my content and they do so respectfully. And that is very helpful to hear. It's very rarely meant antagonistically. Further down the line, you get people who are recommended the video who aren't subscribed and who hate the sound of your voice, or they remind you of their ex-girlfriend or whatever, and they just have a vendetta against you and are being snarky for no reason. There's no reason to read that. I deliberately do not read anything. I read my YouTube comments for 24 hours, my Instagram comments for about 8 hours, but I don't read anything about myself or my work online. Very, very strictly. I made the fatal error once of Googling myself when I had to apply for my visa to come here to say I need some nice articles about myself. Why don't I Google myself? I ended up stumbling, people write entire blog posts, entire, discussion pages, Reddit threads. I read one of those and I was like, never again. Search block my name. Leave the Facebook groups that comment about me. I cannot, for both reasons, because I don't like to read praise and there's no reason to read negativity. There's no reason to get this false idea of yourself in your head when this is what's real, not for you, but for me. This is what's real. This isn't real for me. There's no reason why that should be real and should impact my work in everyday life. If that makes sense, because it does impact your work. You start to speak to an audience, and you will either start to speak to your haters or speak to people who revere you and put you on a pedestal, neither of which is good.
Yeah, no, that's very fascinating. I mean, it's a lot too, right? Going down that Google rabbit hole. I did that myself in terms of doing the research for this conversation, and it was just so fascinating. I'm like, how do people have this time to talk about this person in a 30-page discussion thread? It's crazy.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I found, it was a message board or something about YouTubers or something. I'm like, I read something that's what's always fascinating to me about this experience that you all are going through as your platforms grow, because you're dealing with this level of micro fame where you're not
even fame. Who the fuck even are we?
Well, you have a platform, 1 million people 1 million people subscribing to your channel.
But it's the perception. It's this weird perception that people have that followers equals status.
Yeah.
When in reality, you feel no different as a human. People would, sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but people would ask me how does it feel to have 1 million subscribers? And I would say, if my goal in starting YouTube was to set out to get 1 million subscribers, I would have this sense of achievement. I'm done. I've won the game. But that's not why I started YouTube. I started YouTube to explore dress history, to share this passion that I have, to teach, to experiment. And I haven't achieved, there's no end goal to that. Therefore, I feel no different from 100,000 subscribers to 100 subscribers to 1 million to 10 million. It will feel no different to me as a real human being.
Yeah, it's an infinite game for you. This is just, it's never ending. There's no end point. It's just infinitely exploring your curiosity. But as we talked about earlier, I mean, there are these costs that you weren't necessarily aware of going into it, in terms of how people would treat you and as your platform has grown, which is such a difficult thing. To hear you talk about that is such a difficult thing, I from what you're telling me, to deal with and manage as you continue on as a creator.
Yeah, there's and I have had conversations with other creators about this, the mental health. I don't really like to get too bogged down into it, because there is an immense amount of privilege in having a platform and being able to make a living in your passion in a field that so many other people struggle to make a living in. Dress history, I'm saying specifically, but there is what people don't understand about, having a platform and going viral especially, is it is not fun. It is the worst anxiety panic attack that extends for the period of weeks that it goes on. And then it has some very nice benefits. After that, you get paid well for your mental distress. But, it's not, every job has its drawbacks. Maybe you hate waking up, or you hate your commute to your 9 to 5. I happen to hate the public aspect of my job, but it's a price, it's a decent price to pay. How did I get onto this? Sorry, I just wandered.
No, we were talking about talking about the concept of like microfame and like the idea of how it's an oddity that you have to deal with. And what I was trying to allude to is like, you're in this space where like 1 million people know who you are, but like you could walk outside your apartment or wherever you're living in London, and the majority of people wouldn't like hound you like they would, William and Kate if they saw them in London, right? Or Princess Diana when she was alive, right? So you're in this, it's strange, right? Like I don't have that type of, influence in terms of like this show. It's still very small, but I just find that so fascinating that it's uncharted territory, right? Like, there's years of under the belts of people who work in Hollywood, right? Like that industry has been around for a long time now, where people kind of know how that works. But this new territory that you're navigating as a creator, in terms of the being in a public facing position, it's weird. For lack of better term, it's weird because really weird.
Celebrities, actors, performers tend to be trained, tend to have public presence, performance aspect, have marketing and publicity teams. This whole phenomenon of regular people suddenly having this immense public attention is such a weird, like, none of us, I feel like, are equipped to deal with this. As we mentioned earlier, I come from the mindset of I'm part of a team. I'm working with other people, for causes. Who started calling me an expert, the one authority on why do you trust me and you don't trust this actual, person over here who has done this specific research for all their life, and I'm just doing an overview video to introduce you to this it makes no sense. Anyway, I'm continually baffled by the publicity aspect of it, but as I said earlier, it does, like, the one is probably something I wouldn't trade for anything, but to be able to support myself doing what I am so passionate about doing, it's a price to pay, but it gets me through. That knowledge gets me through the days when I'm like, please, can I stop being Bernadette Banner? You cannot escape it, because you get your bank statement in the post and it says Bernadette Banner on it. Not her, me, but there's no difference, Yes. But there is a difference. There has to be a difference, but it's weird. It messes with your head a bit.
Yeah, because again, too, it's like the content that you're posting on YouTube and on Instagram and elsewhere, it's a snapshot of who you are as a person. It's not a holistic view of like all your complexities and all your eccentricities as a human being. Like
and flaws, goodness, flaws and mistakes, exactly. And everyone's problematic. But if you're problematic, then you're canceled.
Yes.
What?
Yeah. We all have that to deal with. So it's wild. And I'm glad we've been able to chat about that here in this conversation, because I think this is like the frontier that we're like crossing now, is like, now we have these terms such as the creator economy, and like big businesses really start getting invested in it. Like we're going to have to deal with like a whole host of issues and trade-offs, along with like the wins and successes that come along with being a creator. So to wrap up this conversation, Bernadette, I want to ask you, how do you define success going forward with your channel?
As long as I'm happy, that's really all that I need. If I'm in a good space and I feel fulfilled in the work that I do, I feel like I'm making a difference, I'm helping people, and I'm surviving, I'm not living on the streets doing it, which is a ridiculous concept, but maybe it's not. I'm supporting myself doing something that I love and I'm happy doing it, then that's all that I need. I could never gain a subscriber again as of tonight. I could lose subscribers, as long as this was something that I told myself back when I had 200,000 subscribers. And I realized I'm making a very comfortable living, because you compare yourself to other creators. How come this person has 500,000 or this person has 3 million? And then I realized I'm making a good living. I get to work for myself doing this incredible job. This is all that I need. I'm happy. I don't need what they have. So that's success to me. As long as I'm meeting my needs and I'm content doing it. I'm good.
Well said. Well, Bernadette, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Video Craft Show presented by Video Husky. This was fun for me, and I feel like my nerves, as the conversation progressed, my nerves went down, and we got to actually chat on a human to human level.
Yeah. Oh, please, please don't. So. See, this is the issue. This is what we're talking about. Is why do I make you nervous? I'm literally just a person. You make me nervous. Speaking to any human makes me nervous.
I think what made me nervous, honestly, Bernadette, again, was just how articulate you are. And I know you alluded to this, you have the magic of editing, right? Post-production. But it's not the fact that you have 1 million subscribers that intimidates me in this particular context. It's more just the intellectual depth at which you conduct yourself. You are a very bright person.
That is such a compliment. Thank you.
I honestly, I consider myself an intellectual person, but like you said, when you were talking about comparison, right, to other YouTubers, sometimes I question whether or not I can hang intellectually with certain people. And so in the context of this conversation that we've had, and even the conversation that I had with Dr. Becky, it's wow, I've got some real knowledgeable people here. Am I smart enough to hang out with these people? And then usually, what ends up happening is I just say, no, just embrace that you're an idiot and it's cool. Just embrace that you know nothing and just ask questions.
There's different kinds of smarts. I was a straight average B student in school. But it depends on what you're passionate about. If you're passionate about YouTube, content creation, you're brilliant. You're a genius.
Yeah, exactly.
You could be street smart or you could be book smart. If you know how to navigate your way through a big city, that's an element of smarts.
Yeah.
Everyone's smart in different ways. Sorry.
Exactly. No, well said. Honestly, yeah. There's it's not necessary. Smart intelligence isn't necessarily one measure of intelligence is book smarts, but there's other kinds of intelligence too. So, well, Bernadette, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I had a lot of fun chatting with you.
I had a good time too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you again to Bernadette Banner for joining me on this particular episode of the Video Craft Show presented by Video Husky. Want to remind everybody out there, if you are enjoying the podcast, make sure to share it with a friend. Pass along the podcast episode either in YouTube form or the actual URL of each episode to a friend via text message or however it is that you are messaging with your friends and families today. There are a gajillion different ways that you can message people. Facebook Messenger, text message, Instagram DM, Twitter DM. It just it's nonstop. It's nonstop. There needs to be one specific platform someday that allows us to do that. Wow, I'm rambling on. I'm going to stop there. Share the episode if you can. Also, we want to remind you that we have our free scripting template. If you are struggling to structure and organize your ideas, all you have to do is go to www.videocraftshow.com, tap on the button that says get a free resource, and you will be directed to a form where you can sign up to join our email list. And when you join our email list, you will get our free scripting template delivered straight to your inbox right after you sign up, pending confirmation, of course. And this thing can help you organize your ideas much better than you probably are at this current moment, because it's very hard to put together ideas, I think. Here I am struggling to convey ideas, and I'm talking about a piece of paper. Anyways, nevertheless, again, go to videocraftshow.com to get that. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Cast, Castbox, iHeartRadio, radio.com, Air. There are so many different ways that you can subscribe to this podcast. And also make sure to like and leave a comment if you are enjoying the episode on YouTube. And finally, want to go and give a shout out to my team for helping me to produce this podcast. Always got to give thanks to Nikki Vicente, as well as Ingrid Saraiba and Paulo Lopez for all their hard work on the show. This show would not be possible without them. And just a reminder, the talent that is responsible for putting together this show is part of an ace team at Video Husky. Now, if you would like your videos to be edited to look just like this, then visit videohusky.com to learn more. And you can actually sign up to take our best fit client quiz. If you are somebody that is looking for video editing, you want to go to www.videohusky.com to go and sign up for that. All right. Well, that is going to do it for this episode of the Video Craft Show presented by Video Husky. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you again next week.